Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss notes series, where I take my group of players through the D&D 5th edition Out of the Abyss Underdark campaign adventure at my friendly local game store. So when we finished the last video, they had just entered the Rockblight, which is sort of a mini dungeon crawl within Blingdenstone, the Deep Gnome city that's being reclaimed by the Deep Gnomes, but is still quite dangerous in and of itself. Um, and they had encountered a ghost that had used horrifying visage and uh, and and aged two of the players. One of them was a tiefling that was already like 40 years old, according to the player, and is now 80 something. And the other one was a wood elf that aged 20 years, so it wasn't quite the dramatic effect. But that's just what happened. They were debating: do we leave and go get greater restoration cast um, on the tiefling ranger, who plays a lot like a thief but has ranger ability. It's a ranger class but plays a lot like a thief. It's an interesting character. Used to be a pirate. Um, or do they stay? And like the whole party was like, we need to leave, and that player was like, no, let's keep adventuring. So, which was interesting. I mean, if it had been me and my character, I'd have been like, let's go, because with horrifying visage from a ghost, if you don't get it cured within 24 hours, the aging effect is permanent. So this player's playing very bravely with their character, but they're kind of like, yeah, we just came in. Let's see what happens next. And they also expressed during the last session, the player did that. Well, what if we leave and then come back and just get hit with it again? So I don't know. There's actually not a whole lot more ghosts in here. They may have run into the only one, but they don't know that. So anyway, um, there's a couple of rules things that I want to touch on um, before I get into what happened. There's not a lot that actually happened. It ended up being a very combat-centric session because they went right to this one room that's like one of the most grindy. It's just this grind combat, and I'll get into it here in a little bit. They went straight to it. Out of all the places they could have gone in the Rockblight, they went right to that. Um, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and players are going to do what players are going to do. But I'll talk about some rule stuff. But before that, I love my players' creativity. Two of my players bring minis, miniatures to the games, which makes it super helpful because my personal miniature collection is not that large. I have a few that I've started collecting over the past year and a half, but I mean, they have, the big cases full of them. And they both mod minis a lot. They create their own or customize their own minis. And last session, after the tiefling got aged, so one of my other players shows up, uh, and he puts this mini down for that character that's like this hunched over, oh dear, this old tiefling lady that I loved. So I'll show a picture of that here. I'll edit that in to the video. Wanted you to take a look at that. But I just love the creativity. A lot of times, when it comes to minis, and this same player that made the little custom mini also statted up Eldith, the NPC, for use as kind of a pickup character when people just join the session. Oh, I'm just playing for a night to check you guys out or whatever. Um, and also, if somebody loses their character and doesn't have a chance to, it's like it's going to be a while before we can work another character, and they may play Eldith for a session or two. So it's the same character. So what I'm saying is, I'm so glad to have very creative players. A lot of my players are creative in different ways. Some of them write songs, and some of them write poetry, and some of them do backstory stuff, and some of them bust out with these really cool minis. Just all this different stuff that they do. So try. I'm not saying anybody out there does, but try not to squelch. Don't as a DM feel like you have to be in such control that don't introduce anything on me. You know, let players introduce stuff. Now it's better if they give you a heads up, like, hey, can I put this into the game or whatever. But don't just automatically squash them. The creativity and all that the players bring to the game outside of just role playing during the game is a lot of fun, and I appreciate it a lot. So, and I just love the little. I wouldn't have thought to make a little hello Sunny tiefling mini, as a result of what happened in last session with that horrifying visage from the ghost. So anyway, some other stuff. We talked a little bit about invisibility. Um, because the same character that got aged also found a potion and drank it, and it turned out to be an invisibility potion. Whoop, went invisible. Uh, so reread the rules in fifth edition, and it's basically they're invisible, can't be seen, uh, and if they attack or what is it? Take cast a spell, I think, then they'll become visible. So the visibility hadn't changed a whole lot. Let's see here. The spell ends for a target that attacks or casts a spell, and it lasts for an hour with concentration. With drinking a potion, I don't think there's any concentration needed. I could be wrong. They just drink the potion and they're invisible for how long. I guess you'd have to see what level of potion it is to see how long it lasts. Um, so wanted to kind of just because we looked it up, and also there was a discussion: if you're invisible, can you see yourself? And I believe the answer is no. Maybe somebody knows different. I actually think I threw that out there on Twitter to the D&D folks, and they didn't answer, probably because it's been asked so often. Um, and anything you touch or have on your person, I believe, let me grab the spell again, becomes, anything the target is wearing or carrying is invisible as long as it is on the target's person. So if you're wearing something or carrying something, it's invisible. If you pick up something, I guess while you're invisible, it becomes invisible too, is what I'm assuming based on that wording. So just wanted to kind of touch on that. Um, Aging rules. And before I forget to mention, we had feedback from a viewer. Let me see if I can find this. And they said it's Teon Schilperort. So if I'm saying that wrong, I'm not trying to. Teon Schilperort. Gave feedback, and sometimes I've mentioned we've had viewer questions or comments, and I don't give credit. I'm going to start trying to do that moving forward. I apologize if you've given good feedback to the show before, the videos before, and I haven't mentioned you by name. I know there's a guy named Chris, and some other folks that have given great feedback. But he said, Tion said, in my opinion, your 900 gold for a 5th level spell seems a heavy cost. Although I get why you want the characters who don't have a relative large amount of gold. I looked it up, and if you want to go old school, it's going by 3.5 edition rules, it will cost about 750 gold pieces. But if you want to have 5th edition, it says in the Adventurers League that a greater restoration spell costs approximately 450 gold. He says, I enjoyed the rest of the video very much. Thanks. So appreciate you, Toon. I hope I'm saying that wrong. Feel free to correct me. So basically, we looked it up, and it gives, I can't remember, I'd have to go look. It's either in the player's handbook for services or maybe somewhere in the Dungeon Master. I think it's in the player's handbook under services that you can buy. Lower level spells, the cost is given, and then it says up to that, it just gets, increasingly more expensive, and I guess they kind of leave it up to the DM. Now, previous versions, as was just pointed out, had more strict delineated, which I'd prefer. Just tell me what the average cost is. Rather than making me figure it out. This is why I buy rule books, but I understand some people don't want to be constrained. It's the big pendulum swinging back and forth between preferences. That I guess previous versions, gave a specific amount. 5th edition doesn't really. And then I guess in the Adventurers League, which is sort of an official Wizards of the Coast D&D program where people can come play in official games and have their stuff tracked and everything through Wizards of the Coast, it gives guidance. So the Adventurers League evidently gives guidance. I don't know where exactly that's at. But this comes from when I was saying, well, what do I do? Because they need to get greater restoration cast, and there's a cleric in Blending Stone that can do it. How much do I charge for that? And they have 900 gold right now, which at this point in the adventure, I mean, I don't want to take their hard-earned stuff away just arbitrarily. But if a good story reason can come along to justify it, I'm inclined to go that way, because at this point, Out of the Abyss, I've said multiple times, is split into 2 halves. And the first half of the adventure, which they're coming towards the end of, should feel like constant, I'm on the run, I'm not really in charge of my destiny, everything I get is like, scrabbling at the hard earth to get anything. I'm not the biggest, baddest dude and dudette walking around with the best armor and weapons and equipment and all that stuff. It should be kind of a survival. I'm trying to escape the Underdark. So I was like, wow, they got 900 gold. I wonder if there's something I could do about that would make sense in game, not just arbitrarily say somebody comes along and steals your gold, which I don't want to do that. But since the tiefling got aged and they need to have a 5th level spell cast, then and if they go to that cleric and do it, because the whole party's like, you got to do this, and the player's like, we don't have to do this right now. But I imagine eventually they'll go. What do I charge? And I'm landing on, I'm probably going to charge 500-600 gold. That's kind of where I'm landing. That'll leave them some gold, but also, show there should be in-game dynamics and negatives for stuff. You got aged 40 years. We got to do something about this. So, speaking of aging, I cannot find, and I've tried to tweet it, the main D&D, Chris Perkins and Mike Merles and Jeremy Crawford, evidently there's not, and I've looked around, and as far as official rules in 5th edition, there's nothing for aging, which I think is kind of crazy, because there's effects. Monsters have effects and spells and stuff that will age you. So if that's a negative effect, there should be some kind of rules. Now, usually they say, well, for every 10 years or whatever, or once they hit this age, then subtract this much from their constitution and this and that and the other. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. Because you had a tiefling that got aged from 40 to 80 something. There's got to be some kind of negative effects. So I can't find anything. Evidently there's no official aging rules in 5th edition, which I think isn't on purpose. They left that out on purpose because ageism or something. They want to be socially friendly or social justice or whatever. I don't know. That would be my guess, because there's other parts of 5th edition that are, they're purposefully inclusive and that sort of thing. So maybe that's why they left aging out. I doubt it was just an oversight, but there could be other reasons why they did. The point is, I would like some aging rules. So what I'm doing in the short term, I just said, anything like an initiative roll, an attack roll, or any ability or saving throw that involves your physical abilities, strength, dex, constitution, is at disadvantage. And that's what I'm doing. I could say, well, your wisdom's going down because you're getting old and addle-brained. I'm not going to get into all that. So that's just how I'm doing it for right now. And maybe that's what the designers wanted. They gave us this advantage-disadvantage rule, which I like, just to make it easier to do, bonuses and penalties. So but that's how I'm going with it in time being. If somebody else has thoughts or knows where the official rules are, not something the DM's Guild that some person came up with for sale in the DM's Guild, even if it makes sense. I'm saying, do you know in 5th edition, the official core rule books, do you know where the aging effects are? And if you don't, then, feel free to say, well, hey, there's a good guide in the DM's Guild, or here's how we do it, or here's some custom rules. But I'm uncomfortable with people saying, oh, yeah, that's out there. But it's really some supplement that, John Jones, whoever, just came up with. I don't know how play tested that is or whatever. Not everything has to be play tested to the 9th degree, but you understand what I'm saying. My preference first would be for official rules from the designers, because age has always been kind of a part of the game, especially if you have monsters and abilities and stuff like that that can affect you negatively through, boom, you're 100 years old now. Well, all my abilities are still the same according to the rules. That's just my thing. But anyway, for the meantime, that's how we're handling it. Now, as far as what happened in the session last time, they encountered the ghost. They got a little bit of treasure out of the ghost home where the ghost used to live. And the character, because they were the only one under the bed, pocketed the gems and then drank the potion, turned invisible, and it's the same character. They got aged. So the route they took, there's 2 or 3 different ways they could go. The way they went, I thought they were going to go further south and get into a whole different area. But where they went, boom, they went to area, they went up the stairs to area 17, or to area 19, which is a crystal garden, which is these crystals that are kind of semi-transparent, that if you look through them, everything looks kind of blurred. And there's a deep gnome statue that's like holding one, trying to bring it up to his eyes. And he's obviously been turned into a statue by the Medusa. The characters know the Medusa's in there because the guard who let them in, the captain of the guard who let them into the Rockblight told him about this. Another thing on the Rockblight, make sure to reinforce with your folks. Rockblight feels barren, cold, and hostile. Okay, it's very humid. There's shallow pools and streams. The air is damp and chill. Pools are difficult terrain. Um, and there's just a lot of rubble and stuff strewn everywhere. So the minute they go on the Rockblight, it just feels cold and hostile. I keep reaffirming that or restating that to my players. But yeah, they go into this crystal garden, which is area 19, and basically, by inspecting the statue, it's obvious that the deep gnome statue that used to be a deep gnome but got turned by the Medusa. Was trying to raise one of the crystal to its eyes, and they figure out, oh, this is kind of, because you could break off the crystals pretty easy. They all took some with them. By looking through them, it's kind of hazy, and they figured out correctly that if you're looking through one of these, it helps you. Doesn't make you immune to the Medusa's gaze, but it'll give you advantage. So, but then if you're holding a crystal and attacking, you get disadvantage to your attacks. So then they went from there into Area 21, which, boy, this room is a grind. I don't know how else to put it. There are 30 statues of drow warriors in here, and they've all been, the Medusa turned basically the drow, because she used to be a drow priestess and she's becoming a Medusa over time, and she's in league with Ogremoch's Bane, which is this sort of sentient cloud of dust that's in the Rockblight that can take over elementals and turn them to its nefarious will. But there are 30 statues of petrified drow warriors that Ogremoch's Bane has used its power to animate the statues. So now they're elemental creatures, even though they were just statues that the Medusa made out of. So there's 30 drow statues in here in a rank and file. And basically, they animate 6 at a time and attack. And you use the stats from the monster manual of animated armor, but you make them elementals instead of constructs. So if there's stuff that spells or effects or attacks or whatever that either target or don't target or affect elementals, then it'll affect these and not constructs. Same exact stats, just different creature type. Constructs or elementals instead of constructs. Other than that, it's just like fighting a bunch of animated armors, which they have a low armor class, but they're hard to kill. Or no, they have a high armor class, if I remember right. Yeah, because they're made out of stone. Yeah, they have a fairly high armor class. It's like 17 or 18, if I remember right. And they do. Whoop, sorry about that. They do a double melee. They just walk up and do a double bash, and if they get up on you, they can beat you down. But the real challenge here, if you destroy those 6, if you spend 1 round or longer after that in the room, 6 more animate, and then 6 more, and then 6. So they just keep animating, coming at you until either you're dead or they're dead. And the first, by the time they went to 2 rounds of these statues, and I'm probably going to add at least 1 more rank of statues in here and make it like, add another multiple of 6 on top of the 30, because I'm trying to give them more experience to help them get to level 7. As I've mentioned, because they've had an incredibly large amount of players in the past. We're down to like 6 or 7 now, which is a good size. But there's been times where we've had, because we're playing in games where 10, 11, 12, and players, and that's hurt their experience. And I'm not milestoning. I prefer experience. So I'm trying to, give them more of a challenge to earn that, not just give it to them. Which I prefer if possible. If I have to milestone them, I have no choice, I will. But I like the idea of earning what you get. Through experience. D&D has always been kind of based on that. Now, there's other systems out there that aren't, and that's fine. And if you want to milestone your characters, 5th edition is perfectly cool with that, and I'm cool with that. That's just my personal style. So what was interesting in this room, the way I did it, I just drew the map out, and I didn't put every individual drow on the map. I guess we had enough minis for that, but I just animated 6, and I said behind them are more rows of statues going back to the back, and you're not sure how many there are. And what I did is, if somebody was trying to get it behind, kind of go around from the front of the entrance and get behind the statues, I said, well, there's many more ranks, and if you go through there, that's difficult terrain, and if you try to move at your normal speed, you'll bump into one of them, which was enough of a hint for them to go, we don't want to do that, right? Because it's pretty obvious you don't want to touch these things. So that way I didn't put everything down on the map. You can if you want, and that's fine. That's just how I did it, to save time from putting all the miniatures down. They were, in their mind, they kept trying to fight the statues and then work their way around to the back of the room, because they thought the Medusa is in the back of the room. She's not. And that's not metagaming, because they know, they were told there's a Medusa in the Rockblight. So in game, totally in character, they're like, we think the Medusa's behind. So they're trying to work their way around, and the Medusa's not in there. They don't know that yet. So they fought 2 ranks of these things, and they finally figured out, because 1 or 2 of the characters went back into the entrance and on the little steps and stepped out. I think they were going back and looking for room to do ranged attacks, and they realized that if they did that, and I mentioned, when I'm doing attacks, that they seem to be ignoring the people that were outside of the room, and that came about because what I do now, there are times where I'll narratively say, well, they're attacking you or whatever, and there's a story reason for that. What I'll do normally, if it's a fight like this where it's just a bunch of bad guys swarming at the good guys or whatever, then if it's a melee attack or a ranged attack, especially a melee attack, I will count up how many player characters are in range of the enemy, and then I'll roll a dice and randomly determine who it attacks. Now, if one of the people who's nearby had just attacked it and did damage to it, then it's probably going to attack that character. But if there's just an equal chance of, it just walked up and 3 of you are in range, for example, I'll say, well, 3 of you are in range, so you're 1-2, you're 3-4, you're 5-6. I'll roll a 6-sider, and however that comes up, I'm like, that's the one it attacks. And that's the fairest way I know to do it. Now, if there's a story reason or a narrative reason why they would attack, or if that's obviously the spellcaster and we want to take the spellcaster out or whatever, or if there's a racial hatred, or I'll just say, hey, he's attacking you, and that's all there is to it. But otherwise, I try to keep it kind of random. That way nobody feels picked on, and there's an equal chance of taking the hits. So and if it's obvious to the bad guys who they should attack, or this guy's on his last legs, we need to get rid of him, or her or whatever, then I'll do that. But anyway, so that was the extent of they worked their way through 2 ranks of 12 out of at least 30, if not more, and they backed out, and that's right where it ended. They haven't done a short rest or a long rest or anything like that. And speaking of long rests, I reminded them that we're instituting the house rule, since they're in the Underdark and there's all the nightmares, that any given long rest has a 10% chance of not being beneficial. You don't get your hit points back, you don't get your spells, abilities, or whatever. We forgot to do it on the first long rest after instituting that. And they went to the Foamy Mug Inn, or the Foaming Mug Inn, and long rested before going to the Rockblight. And I reminded them, I said, we're not going to redo it. I'm not going to retroactively do it, but I just want to remind everybody, including myself, that we're doing that. So if they go back in here and defeat all of these statues in area 21, what happens is Ogremoch's Bane appears. And Ogremoch's Bane can only be defeated in now it can't hurt you. It can take over elementals, but it can't hurt you specifically. But a gust of wind spell or similar magic can forcibly move the cloud, and casting a banishment spell on the cloud sends it back to its elemental plane of air if it fails a charisma saving throw. A dispel evil and good spell is equally effective and does require a successful attack roll. However, the caster must be in contact with the cloud. So Ogremoch's Bane is interesting narratively. It's not really a major threat. It's a threat to Blingdenstone because it keeps taking over elementals. But if the PCs encounter it, it's not going to hurt them per se directly. It says in here that, and now my characters didn't encounter Ogremoch's Bane because you've got to destroy all the Drow statues before it appears. But Characters within the cloud can sense its malevolence, and a successful DC 15 intelligence arcana check confirms the cloud is extraplanar origin. The cloud has a flying speed of 20 and is impervious to all damage spells except the following. So, and it doesn't have any offensive abilities other than taking over elementals. So I guess I would let an arcana check, come out with the ways to defeat it, because I don't think it's very obvious how it can be defeated. So anyway, that's it for this time. We'll see what happens next video. I appreciate your comments. I love your feedback. A lot of feedback that this helps other DMs with their planning and things like that. So that's huge. I really appreciate that. If you have questions, comments, advice, or whatever, feel free to leave a comment on the video. Make sure to follow the channel if you're not already. And we will catch you next time on Shane Plays. Thanks so much for watching.